You wake up on a Thursday morning in Denver, Colorado, reach for your phone to check the news, and see a single headline that makes your blood run cold. Breaking. US dollar collapses. Federal Reserve announces complete currency failure, all dollar-denominated assets worthless. Your hands tremble as you scroll through hundreds of similar headlines flooding your screen. This isn't a gradual devaluation. This isn't a recession or market correction. This is the complete, instantaneous collapse of the world's primary reserve currency, affecting every single American and billions of people worldwide. The grocery store where Sarah Martinez shops for her weekly supplies becomes ground zero for economic chaos within hours. The electronic payment systems that process credit cards, debit transactions, and digital payments shut down completely as banks scramble to understand what dollar-denominated transactions even mean anymore. Cash registers display prices in dollars that have no value. Customers stand in aisles holding shopping carts full of food they cannot purchase with currency that became worthless while they slept. But here's what makes this scenario truly catastrophic. It happened instantly, completely, and globally. No warnings. No gradual decline. No time for governments, businesses, or individuals to prepare alternative arrangements. The economic foundation that underpinned not just American commerce but international trade, debt obligations, and financial systems worldwide disintegrated overnight. Every dollar bill, every bank account, every mortgage, every credit card balance, every government bond has become meaningless paper and digital entries. Picture the financial district of Manhattan at 9 a.m. on this Thursday morning. Wall Street, normally buzzing with traders managing trillions of dollars in assets, stands eerily silent as electronic trading systems shut down automatically when they cannot calculate the value of dollar-denominated securities. The New York Stock Exchange building, representing centuries of American capitalism, displays screens showing only error messages where stock prices should appear. Banking towers that house the financial instruments of global commerce have become monuments to a monetary system that ceased to exist overnight. The Federal Reserve building in Washington, D.C. becomes the epicenter of desperate attempts to understand what caused the collapse. Emergency meetings convene as economists, government officials, and central bank leaders try to comprehend how the world's most stable currency could simply cease to exist. The irony is stark. The institution responsible for maintaining dollar stability cannot explain why dollars no longer represent value, and their own salaries, operating budgets, and policy tools are all denominated in the worthless currency they were supposed to protect. Treasury Secretary Amanda Richardson faces cameras in the Treasury Department briefing room, attempting to explain the unexplainable to a nation in panic. Behind her, the walls display portraits of previous Treasury secretaries who managed currency crises, recessions, and financial disasters, but none who faced the complete elimination of money itself. Her prepared statements about economic policy and monetary response become meaningless when the fundamental tool of economic management, currency, no longer exists. From Los Angeles to Miami, from Seattle to Houston, the same impossible reality unfolds. ATMs refuse to dispense cash because dollars have no value to dispense. Credit card terminals display error messages when customers attempt purchases. Online banking websites crash under traffic from millions of Americans trying to understand what happened to their life savings, retirement accounts, and checking balances that existed yesterday but mean nothing today. Mike Thompson stands outside his local Bank of America branch in suburban Chicago, watching through locked glass doors as bank employees inside argue with supervisors about how to handle customers whose accounts contain numbers that no longer represent purchasing power. His checking account shows $3,247.85. His savings account displays $18,942.33, and his retirement account indicates $127,589.41. But these numbers now represent precisely zero buying power for groceries, rent, or any other necessity. The branch manager, Linda Foster, has worked in banking for 23 years, managing mortgages, business loans, and personal accounts through multiple economic cycles. She understands interest rates, credit risk, and monetary policy, but faces a situation beyond any banking training or experience. How do you explain to customers that their life savings exist only as meaningless numbers in computer systems? How do you process loan payments when the currency of the debt no longer exists? How do you operate a financial institution when finance itself becomes impossible? 3 time zones away in Phoenix, Maria Santos arrives at her job as a retail manager only to discover that her store cannot open because the point-of-sale systems cannot process transactions in a currency that no longer exists. The cash in the register, the credit card processing equipment, the inventory management system that tracks dollar values, everything stops functioning when the underlying currency becomes meaningless. She stands outside the locked store with her employees, all of whom are wondering how they'll be paid for work when dollars no longer compensate for labor. The corporate headquarters receives frantic calls from thousands of stores across the country, all reporting identical problems. Inventory systems that cannot calculate value, payroll systems that cannot process wages, supply chain management that cannot coordinate purchases when prices become meaningless. Regional managers attempt to develop emergency protocols for operating retail businesses without currency, but discover that every aspect of modern commerce depends on monetary exchange that no longer functions. The immediate human impact creates scenes of confusion and growing panic across America as families realize that their financial resources have evaporated completely. In suburban Denver, high school teacher Jennifer Walsh sits with her husband David, a construction foreman, and their two teenage children around their kitchen table, trying to explain a situation they don't understand themselves. Their mortgage statement shows they owe $187,432 on their house. But what does that debt mean when dollars don't exist? Their credit card balances total $14,627, but what obligation do they have to pay debts denominated in worthless currency? Their 15-year-old daughter Emma asks the question that parents across America struggle to answer. Does this mean we don't have to pay for college anymore? Does this mean we're poor now, or does it mean everyone is poor? The family realizes that concepts like wealth, poverty, debt, and savings become meaningless when the currency that defined these conditions disappears completely. David's construction company faces immediate crisis as payroll becomes impossible, equipment financing stops functioning, and material suppliers refuse deliveries when payment methods become meaningless. The half-finished houses his crew was building represent thousands of hours of labor and tens of thousands of dollars in materials, but the homeowners cannot make payments and the bank cannot process mortgage funds when dollars cease to exist. But it's not just personal finances disappearing. In rural Kansas, farmer Tom Bradley discovers that his agricultural loans, equipment financing, and crop insurance policies are all denominated in dollars that suddenly have no meaning. The grain elevator that normally purchases his wheat harvest cannot offer prices in a currency that doesn't exist. The diesel fuel, fertilizer, and seed suppliers he depends on cannot sell products when payment methods have become meaningless overnight. Tom's farm represents 4 generations of family agricultural work, built through decades of careful financial planning, land purchases, and equipment investments. The farm's value exists in productive land, livestock, and agricultural infrastructure, but the financial systems that connect agricultural production to food distribution require currency-based transactions that no longer function. His corn and wheat still have nutritional value, his cattle still provide milk and meat, but the economic systems that convert agricultural products into family income have vanished completely. The agricultural commodity markets shut down completely as traders cannot establish prices for wheat, corn, soybeans, and livestock when the currency used for pricing disappears. The Chicago Board of Trade, which has operated commodity markets for over 170 years, faces its first complete shutdown not due to war, natural disaster, or financial crisis, but due to the elimination of money itself. At St. Mary's Hospital in Boston, Administrator Dr. Linda Rodriguez faces immediate crisis as the healthcare facility discovers that insurance payments, Medicare reimbursements, and patient billing systems all operate in dollars that no longer represent value. The hospital's payroll system cannot calculate employee wages in worthless currency. Medical suppliers refuse deliveries when payment arrangements become meaningless. Critical medications, medical equipment, and healthcare services face immediate disruption when the entire payment system collapses. The hospital's emergency room continues receiving patients with heart attacks, broken bones, and other medical emergencies that require immediate treatment regardless of currency collapse. Doctors and nurses continue providing care because medical ethics and professional responsibility transcend economic systems. But the institution cannot maintain operations when every aspect of hospital administration depends on financial transactions that become impossible. Dr. Rodriguez calls emergency meetings with department heads, attempting to develop protocols for providing healthcare when payment systems disappear. The pharmacy cannot order medications when pharmaceutical companies refuse orders without currency-based payment. The laboratory cannot process tests when equipment maintenance contracts become meaningless. Surgery departments cannot maintain sterile supplies when medical device companies cannot accept payment for essential materials. Social media explodes with confused posts, desperate questions, and growing panic as Americans try to understand what happened to their economic reality. #dollar collapse trends worldwide within minutes, but the posts reveal the depth of confusion about what currency collapse means for daily life. A single mother from Detroit posts a video of herself standing in her empty kitchen. "I have $300 in my wallet and $12,000 in my bank account, but I can't buy groceries for my kids because none of it means anything anymore." Her name is Keisha Williams, and she works 2 jobs, morning shifts at a coffee shop and afternoon shifts at a daycare center, to support her 7-year-old son Marcus and 5-year-old daughter Zara. Her carefully managed budget, her savings account for emergencies, her checking account for monthly expenses, and her cash reserves for unexpected costs all become worthless simultaneously. The children need breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but the money she earned through months of hard work cannot purchase food when currency itself disappears. A retired teacher from Florida shares a photo of her investment statements. "I saved for 35 years for retirement. My 401k shows $400,000, but my financial advisor says it's all worthless now. How do I pay for my medications or my rent when my life savings disappeared overnight?" Dorothy Chin taught high school mathematics in Jacksonville for 3 decades, contributing consistently to retirement accounts and making careful investment decisions to ensure financial security in her golden years. Her diversified portfolio, her conservative investment strategy, and her systematic approach to retirement planning become meaningless when the currency that defined her investments ceases to exist. A young couple from Seattle posts from outside their apartment building. "We were supposed to close on our first house tomorrow. The mortgage was approved, the down payment was ready, but now dollars don't exist. What happens to our dream of homeownership when currency itself disappears?" Jake and Ashley Morrison spent 2 years saving for their down payment, working overtime shifts and limiting their social activities to accumulate the $40,000 needed for their first home purchase. Their careful budgeting, their excellent credit scores, and their approved mortgage application become irrelevant when the currency system that enables home purchases disappears completely. The psychological impact proves immediate and profound. Emergency hotlines crash under the weight of millions of calls from Americans seeking help understanding their new economic reality. Crisis counselors try to provide guidance for financial trauma unlike anything in human history. The complete elimination of monetary systems that define people's economic security, life planning, and daily survival. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline reports a 400% increase in calls within the first 6 hours after the dollar collapse, as Americans struggle with the psychological impact of losing not just their money, but the entire economic system that provided structure and meaning to their daily lives. Mental health professionals across the country receive training in crisis counseling for economic trauma, but no previous experience prepares them for helping people cope with the complete elimination of monetary systems. The morning news broadcasts become surreal experiences as anchors attempt to report on economic collapse while their own salaries, the television station's revenue, and the advertising system that funds news operations are all denominated in worthless dollars. News studios continue broadcasting because the immediate crisis creates audience demand, but the underlying business model of commercial television disintegrates when advertising dollars become meaningless. CNN anchor Patricia Thompson sits in the Atlanta newsroom, reading breaking news reports about dollar collapse while her own employment contract, her mortgage payments, and her children's college fund are denominated in the worthless currency. She reports on economic chaos while experiencing it personally, maintaining professional composure while facing personal financial catastrophe. The irony of reporting on currency collapse for a salary paid in collapsed currency creates cognitive dissonance that affects journalists across the country. Children across America walk to school carrying lunch money that cannot purchase food and allowances that cannot buy anything. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez from Phoenix asks her teacher a question that stops the classroom. "Why can't my mom buy groceries with her money anymore?" She says the dollars don't work, but they're the same green papers as yesterday. The teacher realizes she cannot explain currency collapse to children when she doesn't understand it herself. Elementary school teachers across America face impossible conversations with students who cannot comprehend why their allowances, their parents' money, and their piggy bank savings suddenly cannot purchase anything. Children understand that food costs money, that toys require payment, and that money enables purchases, but cannot grasp how money itself can simply stop working. Teachers attempt to explain concepts that challenge fundamental assumptions about value, exchange, and economic systems. Government offices at every level face immediate operational crisis as tax revenues, budget allocations, and public service funding are all denominated in dollars that no longer represent value. Police departments cannot fuel patrol cars when gasoline cannot be purchased with worthless currency. Fire departments face equipment shortages when suppliers refuse dollar payments. Public schools cannot serve meals when food service contracts become meaningless. The Department of Homeland Security faces unprecedented challenges as immigration systems, border security operations, and emergency response protocols all depend on budgets and contracts denominated in worthless currency. TSA operations at airports continue through existing supplies and volunteer efforts, but long-term security operations become questionable when government agencies cannot purchase equipment or pay employees. State governments discover that their entire budgetary systems become meaningless when tax revenues are collected in worthless currency and expenditures are planned in dollars that have no value. Governor Sarah Mitchell of Colorado convenes emergency legislative sessions to address state government operations when budgets, contracts, and payroll systems all become impossible to maintain. Local governments face even more immediate challenges as police, fire, water, and sanitation services require ongoing operations and maintenance that depend on currency-based transactions. Mayor Robert Chen of Portland, Oregon, declares a municipal emergency and attempts to maintain city services through volunteer efforts and resource sharing, but discovers that complex urban systems require coordination mechanisms that depend on monetary exchange. By midday, the scope of the collapse becomes clear. This isn't just about American money disappearing, it's about the foundation of modern economic life evaporating instantly. International trade stops when the world's primary reserve currency becomes worthless. Supply chains collapse when payment methods disappear. Employment becomes meaningless when wages cannot be paid in currency that has value. The global impact proves equally catastrophic. Foreign governments holding U.S. Treasury bonds watch trillions of dollars in reserves become worthless paper. International businesses with dollar-denominated contracts face immediate bankruptcy. Developing nations whose entire monetary systems were pegged to dollar values experience economic collapse more severe than any historical precedent. The Bank of Japan holds over $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury securities as foreign exchange reserves, representing decades of careful monetary policy and international trade surplus accumulation. These reserves, intended to provide economic stability and international purchasing power, become worthless paper overnight. Japanese officials convene emergency meetings to understand how their country's monetary system can function when their primary foreign currency reserves have no value. The European Central Bank faces similar challenges as Eurozone countries discover that their dollar reserves, their international trade relationships, and their multinational corporate investments are all denominated in currency that no longer exists. European Union leaders attempt to coordinate response to American currency collapse while managing their own economic systems that depend heavily on dollar-based international trade. China's foreign exchange reserves include over $3 trillion in various dollar-denominated assets, representing the accumulated trade surpluses from decades of economic growth and export-oriented development. Chinese government officials realize that their country's international economic strategy, based on accumulating dollar reserves through export sales, has become meaningless when dollars cease to represent value. Developing countries that peg their currencies to dollar values face immediate monetary system collapse as their central banks cannot maintain fixed exchange rates with a currency that no longer exists. Small nations that use dollars as their official currency discover that their entire monetary systems have disappeared overnight, creating economic chaos more severe than war or natural disaster. International airports shut down commercial flights as airlines cannot purchase fuel, pay landing fees, or process passenger payments when aviation industry transactions require currency that has no value. Stranded passengers crowd international terminals, unable to purchase food, hotel accommodations, or alternative transportation when their credit cards and cash become worthless. As the sun sets on this first day of post-dollar America, families gather around dinner tables, when they can obtain food through barter, charity, or emergency distribution, in stunned silence. The economic security that defined American middle-class life has vanished more completely than during the Great Depression. But unlike historical economic crises, This collapse eliminates money itself rather than just reducing its value. The first day ends with a country transformed beyond recognition. The American dream, built on the promise that financial planning and hard work create economic security, has been shattered by the complete elimination of the monetary system that made economic planning possible. Emergency broadcast systems issue instructions for obtaining food and essential services, but these instructions assume some form of payment system exists. 7 days into the most economically disorienting week in American history, the country discovers that losing currency entirely creates challenges no economist anticipated and survival strategies no government planned for. The barter economy emerges spontaneously as Americans realize that goods and services still have value even when currency does not. In downtown Los Angeles, former restaurant manager Carlos Rodriguez organizes neighborhood trading sessions where people exchange possessions, skills, and labor for necessities. A retired mechanic repairs cars in exchange for home-cooked meals. A former teacher provides tutoring services for household maintenance work. A graphic designer creates business logos for plumbing repairs. People still need things and people still have things to offer, Carlos explains while mediating a trade between a nurse offering medical consultations and a baker providing fresh bread. The dollars are gone, but the value isn't gone. We just have to figure out how to exchange value without money. The trading sessions attract hundreds of participants who discover that their skills, possessions, and time have worth that exists independently of currency. These informal markets spread rapidly across urban and rural communities as Americans learn that economic activity can continue without formal monetary systems. Farmers trade vegetables for auto repairs. Construction workers exchange home improvements for legal advice. Artists create paintings for dental care. The trades are inefficient compared to monetary transactions, but they provide ways for people to meet their needs when traditional commerce becomes impossible. The bartering process reveals the complexity that money normally simplifies. A plumber who needs groceries must find a grocery store owner who needs plumbing services, or arrange complex multi-party trades where the plumber fixes pipes for a mechanic who repairs the grocer's delivery truck in exchange for food. These coordination challenges explain why money evolved as a medium of exchange, but Americans discover that with patience and community organization, barter can meet survival needs. Local newspapers, operating through volunteer efforts and community support, become essential resources for coordinating barter activities. The Denver Community Exchange publishes weekly lists of available services and needed items, facilitating connections between people who have skills or goods to trade. Similar publications emerge in communities across America as people recognize the need for information systems that coordinate economic activity without currency. The corporate response varies dramatically across industries and companies. Some businesses attempt to continue operations by switching to barter arrangements with employees and suppliers. Others shut down completely when they cannot process payments or maintain supply chains. A few innovative companies create their own internal currency systems, paying employees with company credits that can be exchanged for goods and services within networks of cooperating businesses. Target and Walmart stores across the country face immediate inventory crises as suppliers refuse deliveries when payments become impossible, but some locations experiment with direct trade arrangements. Customers bring items to exchange for groceries and household necessities. The stores accept tools, electronics, clothing, and other goods that can be redistributed to other customers through internal trading systems. Store managers discover that barter operations require completely different skills than currency-based retail. Instead of processing payments and managing cash flow, they must evaluate the relative value of diverse goods, coordinate complex multi-party trades, and maintain inventory balance when customers pay with unpredictable items. Some stores hire professional appraisers to evaluate traded goods, while others develop community councils that determine fair exchange rates for different items and services. Local grocery stores prove more adaptable to barter arrangements than large chain retailers. Family-owned markets begin accepting homegrown vegetables, handmade crafts, and personal services in exchange for essential food items. Community members offer carpentry work, house cleaning, and car maintenance to store owners in return for weekly groceries for their families. The Martinez Family Market in Phoenix becomes a model for post-dollar retail operations as owner Roberto Martinez develops systematic approaches to barter-based commerce. Customers contribute items to a community pool that other customers can draw from based on their contributions. A point system tracks the value of different goods and services, creating internal accounting that enables complex exchanges without currency. We're learning that stores can operate without money when communities work together, Roberto explains. People bring what they have and take what they need, and somehow it balances out. It's more complicated than dollar transactions, but it works when everyone participates honestly. The farming communities adapt most successfully to post-dollar economic arrangements because agricultural products maintain obvious value regardless of monetary systems. Rural areas organize crop-sharing cooperatives where farmers exchange different types of produce, livestock, and agricultural services. Wheat farmers trade grain for dairy products. Cattle ranchers exchange beef for fruits and vegetables. Agricultural equipment sharing becomes common as farmers help each other harvest crops in return for access to machinery. In small-town Nebraska, farmer Bill Jenkins becomes an unofficial community coordinator for agricultural trading. We've always known that food is the real wealth, he explains while organizing exchanges between local producers. The dollar collapse reminds everyone that you can't eat money, but you can always eat food. Farmers are probably better prepared for this than city folks because we understand that real value comes from things you can grow, make, or fix with your hands. The agricultural networks prove essential for urban food security as cities realize their dependence on complex supply chains that require currency-based coordination. Urban communities organize delegations to rural areas, offering manufactured goods, technical services, and skilled labor in exchange for food products. These rural-urban partnerships become lifelines for metropolitan areas that cannot feed their populations through local production. The urban challenges prove more severe as city dwellers with limited barterable goods or practical skills struggle to obtain necessities through trade arrangements. Professional services like accounting, marketing, and financial planning become difficult to exchange for food and shelter when businesses cannot operate in post-monetary environments. Office workers discover that their specialized knowledge has limited trading value when economic systems collapse. However, creative professionals find unexpected opportunities in barter economies. Musicians perform at community gatherings in exchange for meals and housing. Artists create commissioned works for trade goods. Writers provide communication services for small businesses attempting to operate through barter arrangements. The arts community discovers that creative skills translate well to informal economic systems. Theater groups organize performances where audiences pay with food donations, household items, or volunteer labor for the theater. Musicians develop regular performance schedules at community centers, restaurants, and public spaces, receiving meals and accommodation from appreciative audiences. Visual artists create commissioned works for families and businesses, receiving payment through diverse goods and services that meet their daily needs. Healthcare presents the most critical challenge as medical professionals struggle to provide services when insurance systems, pharmaceutical supply chains, and medical equipment financing all collapse with dollar-denominated payment methods. Some doctors and nurses continue working without payment, treating patients in exchange for whatever communities can provide: food, housing, or other services. Dr. Jennifer Chin establishes a community health cooperative where residents contribute whatever they can eat: gardening, cooking, cleaning, repairs, to support basic medical services for their neighborhood. People still get sick and injured when currency collapses, she explains. Healthcare is too important to stop just because payment systems don't work. We're learning to organize medical care around human need rather than financial capacity. Medical professionals organize resource-sharing networks where doctors, nurses, and technicians coordinate services across multiple communities. A surgeon provides operations in exchange for laboratory services from a different community. Nurses offer home care in return for medical equipment and supplies. Pharmacists distribute medications based on community contributions rather than individual payments. The government response proves chaotic and ineffective as federal, state, and local agencies discover that their operations depend entirely on dollar-denominated budgets, contracts, and payment systems. Emergency services continue operating through volunteer efforts and community support, but systematic government functions become impossible when currency disappears. Military bases face immediate supply shortages as defense contractors refuse deliveries when payment becomes impossible. The Department of Defense maintains operations through existing stockpiles and international cooperation agreements, but long-term military readiness becomes questionable when procurement systems collapse with currency failure. Military commanders implement emergency protocols designed for wartime supply shortages, but discover that currency collapse creates challenges beyond combat scenarios. Soldiers continue reporting for duty through patriotic duty and community support, but military families face the same survival challenges as civilian populations when commissaries, base housing, and military services cannot operate through dollar-based transactions. Social services experience immediate crisis as welfare payments, Social Security benefits, and other government assistance programs become meaningless when denominated in worthless dollars. Food stamps, housing vouchers, and Medicaid coverage lose all value overnight. The most vulnerable populations, elderly, disabled, and low-income Americans, face immediate survival threats when safety net programs evaporate with currency collapse. Social workers and government case managers continue serving their clients through volunteer efforts and community support, but cannot provide the financial assistance that defines most government aid programs. Emergency shelters, food banks, and community service organizations become essential resources for populations who previously received government support through dollar-denominated benefits. Children's education continues in many communities through volunteer efforts as teachers work without pay and parents organize cooperative learning arrangements. School buildings remain available, textbooks still contain information, and children still need education even when school district budgets become meaningless. Some communities organize neighborhood schools where parents take turns teaching different subjects based on their knowledge and expertise. Teachers discover that education can continue without district funding when communities value learning and support educational activities. Parent-teacher cooperatives develop curricula that combine traditional academic subjects with practical skills needed for post-dollar survival. Children learn mathematics through barter calculations, social studies through community organization, and science through sustainable living practices. The psychological adaptation occurs in phases as Americans process the reality of complete economic system collapse. Initial panic gives way to problem solving as people discover that survival needs can be met through cooperation and resourcefulness even without currency. Communities that organize effective trading systems report lower stress levels than areas where people attempt individual survival strategies. Mental health challenges intensify for Americans whose identity and self-worth were closely tied to financial success and economic status. Retirees who lost their life savings overnight struggle with depression and anxiety. Business owners who built companies over decades of work face existential crises when their enterprises become meaningless. Young adults who were planning careers in finance, banking, and other money-dependent industries experience confusion about their future prospects. However, some Americans report psychological relief despite economic hardship. People who had been struggling with debt, financial stress, and economic insecurity discover that universal poverty eliminates the shame and anxiety of individual financial failure. When everyone loses their money simultaneously, economic status differences disappear and community cooperation becomes essential for everyone's survival. Support groups emerge in communities across America as people gather to share experiences and coping strategies for post-dollar living. Former financial advisors lead discussions about redefining security and success without monetary measures. Therapists adapt their practice to address collective trauma and community-based healing approaches. The week concludes with America discovering that human society can function without currency, but that efficiency, convenience, and economic security depend heavily on reliable monetary systems. Communities that organize successful cooperation and resource sharing maintain better quality of life than areas where people compete individually for scarce resources. As week 2 begins, the question shifts from whether Americans can survive without dollars to whether they can build sustainable economic systems that provide prosperity and security without relying on currency that can disappear overnight. The crisis reveals both human resilience in adapting to impossible circumstances and the fundamental importance of trust and cooperation in economic relationships. 1 month into America's post-dollar existence, communities across the country develop sophisticated barter networks and alternative economic systems that demonstrate human adaptability while revealing the profound challenges of conducting complex economic activity without standardized currency. The regional trading networks mature into organized systems that facilitate exchanges far beyond simple neighbor-to-neighbor bartering. In the Pacific Northwest, a consortium of small cities creates the Cascadia Exchange Network, where businesses and individuals register their available goods and services in a centralized database. A Seattle software engineer trades web development services for organic vegetables from Portland farmers. An Oregon carpenter provides home repairs in exchange for auto maintenance from Spokane mechanics. The network operates through sophisticated record-keeping that tracks trading credits and debits without using currency. Participants earn exchange units by providing goods or services and spend these units on items they need from other network members. The system recreates some functions of money without creating currency that could become worthless overnight. Network coordinators develop complex algorithms that calculate relative values for different goods and services based on supply, demand, and community needs. Computer programmers working on volunteer basis create software platforms that manage thousands of transactions daily, matching people who have resources with those who need them. The digital infrastructure proves essential for coordinating economic activity across geographic distances without traditional banking systems. Similar networks emerge across different regions, each developing unique approaches to post-monetary commerce. The Texas Plains Trading Cooperative focuses on agricultural and energy resources, connecting rural producers with urban consumers. Oil workers trade petroleum products for manufactured goods. Ranchers exchange cattle for construction materials and technical services. Agricultural processors coordinate food distribution networks that supply urban areas. The Great Lakes Industrial Exchange specializes in manufactured goods and technical services, connecting former automotive workers with steel production facilities and manufacturing equipment. Engineers trade design services for raw materials. Skilled machinists exchange precision work for housing and food. Tool and die makers coordinate complex production schedules through barter arrangements that maintain some industrial production despite currency collapse. The Southeastern Skills Network emphasizes personal services and traditional crafts, connecting artisans with service providers across multiple states. Furniture makers trade handcrafted pieces for legal services. Textile workers exchange custom clothing for medical care. Traditional craftspeople find new markets for skills that seemed obsolete in dollar-based economy but prove valuable in post-monetary systems. The manufacturing sector faces the greatest challenges in adapting to barter-based economics because industrial production requires complex supply chains, specialized materials, and large-scale coordination that becomes extremely difficult without standardized pricing mechanisms. Some factories shut down completely when they cannot obtain raw materials or coordinate production schedules through barter arrangements. However, smaller manufacturing operations and artisan producers find opportunities in the new economic environment. Local furniture makers, clothing manufacturers, and food processors can trade directly with consumers and other local businesses. A furniture workshop in North Carolina trades handcrafted tables and chairs for raw lumber, tools, and workshop space. A textile operation in Massachusetts exchanges custom clothing for wool, cotton, and textile equipment maintenance. These smaller-scale operations prove more adaptable to post-dollar economics because they require fewer inputs, serve local markets, and can adjust production based on available trade opportunities. Artisan manufacturers develop direct relationships with customers, creating custom products in exchange for specific goods and services rather than mass-producing standardized items for dollar-based markets. The technology sector experiences dramatic disruption as software companies, internet services, and technology manufacturing all depend on complex global supply chains and financial systems that require currency-based transactions. Major tech companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Google face immediate operational crises when they cannot purchase components, pay employees, or maintain international operations through barter arrangements. The collapse of major technology companies creates opportunities for local computer services and smaller technology operations. Independent programmers find steady work developing software for community organizations and local businesses. Computer repair services trade technical support for equipment and parts. Small technology companies focus on practical applications that serve immediate community needs rather than global consumer markets. Smaller technology enterprises prove more adaptable to post-dollar economics. Local computer repair services trade technical support for equipment and parts. Independent software developers exchange custom programming for hardware and internet access. Community internet cooperatives organize broadband services through shared resources and volunteer labor. Community technology centers emerge where people share computers, internet access, and technical expertise through cooperative arrangements. Former technology workers teach computer skills in exchange for food and housing. Technical support volunteers maintain equipment and infrastructure that communities need for coordination and communication. The energy sector presents critical challenges as electrical power, gasoline, and heating systems require massive infrastructure investments and ongoing maintenance that becomes difficult to coordinate without currency-based planning and investment. Some utility companies continue operations through community support arrangements, but long-term energy security becomes questionable when complex systems cannot be maintained through barter alone. Electric utilities face immediate challenges as coal suppliers, natural gas providers, and equipment manufacturers refuse deliveries when payment becomes impossible. Power plant operations continue through existing fuel stockpiles and volunteer efforts, but maintenance and long-term fuel supplies require complex coordination that proves difficult without currency-based contracts. Rural communities with access to renewable energy sources adapt more successfully to post-dollar energy systems. Solar panel installations, wind generators, and hydroelectric systems provide power that communities can maintain through cooperative labor. Agricultural areas organize biofuel production from crop waste. Communities with forest resources coordinate firewood production for heating. Renewable energy cooperatives emerge where communities pool resources to maintain and expand clean energy systems. Solar installation crews work for housing and food rather than wages. Wind turbine maintenance requires specialized skills that technicians trade for community support. Hydroelectric systems provide power for multiple communities through resource-sharing agreements. The healthcare transformation continues as medical professionals organize cooperative systems that provide care through community support rather than insurance-based payment. Regional health networks coordinate specialized services across multiple communities. A rural hospital in Montana provides surgical services to a wide area in exchange for medical supplies, food production, and maintenance services from surrounding communities. Medical professionals develop innovative approaches to healthcare delivery when traditional payment systems disappear. Doctors organize mobile clinics that travel between communities, providing specialized care in exchange for local support and basic services. Nurses establish community health programs that emphasize prevention and health education rather than treatment-based medicine. Pharmaceutical access becomes the most critical healthcare challenge as medication production requires industrial-scale operations and international supply chains that cannot function through barter arrangements. Some communities organize medication-sharing cooperatives where people with surplus prescriptions provide them to others with similar conditions. Others attempt to maintain relationships with pharmaceutical manufacturers through large-scale trade agreements involving agricultural products, raw materials, or manufactured goods. Alternative medicine practitioners find increased demand for herbal remedies, traditional healing methods, and preventive care approaches that don't require industrial pharmaceutical production. Herbalists trade medicinal plants for other goods and services. Acupuncturists provide treatment in exchange for community support. Traditional healers share knowledge and skills through apprenticeship programs. The education system evolves into community-based learning networks that operate through volunteer efforts and resource sharing. Parents with specialized knowledge teach subjects matching their expertise. Retired professionals provide career guidance and practical skills training. Community members with trades experience offer hands-on learning opportunities for young people interested in practical skills. Educational cooperatives develop curricula that combine traditional academic subjects with practical skills needed for post-dollar living. Children learn mathematics through barter calculations, budgeting for resource sharing, and measurement for construction projects. Science education focuses on sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, and environmental stewardship. Social studies explores community organization, cooperation, and conflict resolution. Universities and colleges face existential challenges as their operations depend on tuition payments, research funding, and complex administrative systems that become meaningless without currency. Some institutions continue operating through community support and volunteer efforts, focusing on education and research that directly benefit their local areas. Others close completely when they cannot maintain facilities or coordinate educational programs. Higher education transforms toward practical learning and community service as universities that survive focus on research and training that addresses immediate post-dollar needs. Engineering programs develop appropriate technology for community use. Agricultural programs focus on sustainable food production. Medical programs train healthcare workers for community-based practice. The arts and entertainment renaissance accelerates as creative professionals find audiences eager for cultural experiences that don't require monetary transactions. Community theaters organize performances where audiences contribute whatever they can, food, crafts, or volunteer labor for the theater. Musicians perform at local venues in exchange for meals and housing. Artists create works for direct trade with community members who appreciate and support creative expression. Cultural activities become central to community life as people seek meaning and connection beyond economic survival. Art classes operate through skill sharing where experienced artists teach in exchange for materials and studio space. Music groups perform regularly at community gatherings, receiving support through audience contributions of goods and services. Literary communities emerge where writers share work and organize readings in exchange for community support. Local newspapers and magazines continue publishing through volunteer efforts and community contributions. Writers document post-dollar experiences and help communities process the transformation they're experiencing. The crime and law enforcement patterns shift dramatically as traditional property crimes become less relevant when everyone experiences similar economic circumstances, but new challenges emerge around resource distribution and trade disputes. Police departments continue operating through community support, focusing on maintaining order during resource distribution and mediating disputes between trading partners. Criminal activity adapts to post-dollar conditions as theft focuses on essential goods rather than money or valuable possessions. Food, fuel, tools, and medical supplies become targets for desperate individuals who cannot obtain necessities through legitimate trading. However, overall crime rates decrease in communities that organize effective resource sharing because basic needs are met through cooperative systems. Legal professionals adapt to post-dollar environments by providing services through barter arrangements and community support. Lawyers help resolve trading disputes, property ownership questions, and contractual obligations that survive currency collapse. Legal services become more accessible to average citizens when payment doesn't require cash or credit arrangements. Racial and economic tensions that existed before dollar collapse intensify in Detroit as different communities compete for scarce resources and struggle to establish fair trading relationships. Some neighborhoods organize successful cooperative systems while others descend into resource conflicts and social breakdown. The contrast demonstrates how pre-existing social conditions determine post-dollar outcomes. Urban decay accelerates in struggling areas as building maintenance becomes impossible without currency-based contracting systems and residents abandon neighborhoods that cannot organize effective resource sharing. However, some Detroit communities successfully transform abandoned buildings into cooperative housing, urban agriculture, and community workshops that provide essential services through shared labor and resources. The rural-urban trade relationships prove critical for both agricultural and metropolitan communities, but these arrangements require careful coordination to ensure fair exchanges and sustainable resource flows. Successful partnerships emerge where urban areas provide manufactured goods, technical services, and skilled labor in exchange for food, energy, and raw materials from rural regions. The Midwest Agricultural Alliance creates one of the most successful rural-urban partnerships by organizing systematic exchanges between farming communities and industrial cities. Rural areas provide food, ethanol fuel, and raw materials while urban areas supply manufactured goods, technical services, and processing facilities. The alliance operates through detailed accounting systems that ensure balanced exchanges while maintaining long-term sustainability. Transportation networks become essential for maintaining rural-urban trade as communities develop alternative fuel systems and coordinate logistics without currency-based shipping services. Bicycle cooperatives, electric vehicle sharing, and biodiesel production enable resource flows between communities that would otherwise become isolated by transport costs. The alliance organizes regular trading caravans that travel between rural and urban areas, carrying goods and facilitating direct exchanges between producers and consumers. These caravans become social events that strengthen relationships between communities and provide opportunities for cultural exchange and information sharing. The energy sector developments prove crucial for long-term post-dollar sustainability as communities realize that reliable power sources enable manufacturing, communication, and other activities essential for complex economic organization. Areas with renewable energy resources develop significant advantages over regions dependent on fossil fuels that require currency-based international trade. California's Central Valley communities organize solar cooperatives that provide electrical power for agricultural processing, manufacturing, and residential needs. The cooperatives operate through shared ownership and maintenance responsibilities, creating energy independence that supports other economic activities. Community members contribute labor for installation and maintenance while sharing the benefits of clean electricity production. Wind energy cooperatives develop in Great Plains communities where steady winds provide reliable power generation. Former oil workers apply their technical skills to wind turbine installation and maintenance, trading their expertise for community support and energy access. The cooperatives coordinate production across wide areas to ensure consistent power supply despite variable wind conditions. Hydroelectric projects in mountainous regions provide power for multiple communities through resource-sharing agreements that coordinate maintenance responsibilities and power distribution. Engineering knowledge from former utility workers proves essential for maintaining complex systems through cooperative labor rather than currency-based contracting. Similar renewable energy projects develop across regions with appropriate natural resources. Geothermal systems in volcanic areas, biomass production in forested regions, and small-scale hydroelectric in river communities create energy independence that supports manufacturing, communication, and other essential activities. The technology adaptation continues as communities recognize that communication, information processing, and coordination tools remain essential for complex economic organization even when currency disappears. Local technology cooperatives maintain internet services, computer networks, and communication systems through shared resources and volunteer expertise. Community internet networks develop using mesh networking technology that connects households and businesses through cooperative infrastructure. Former telecommunications workers provide technical expertise in exchange for community support, maintaining broadband access that enables coordination between communities and access to information resources. Computer hardware sharing cooperatives emerge where communities pool resources to maintain and upgrade technology systems that serve multiple users. Software development focuses on practical applications for resource management, coordination systems, and educational tools that serve immediate community needs rather than commercial markets. The manufacturing renaissance occurs in communities that successfully organize post-dollar production systems, as local manufacturing becomes essential when international trade becomes impossible without currency-based payment methods. Small-scale, flexible manufacturing operations prove more adaptable to barter-based economics than large industrial facilities that require complex supply chains and standardized pricing. Regional manufacturing networks emerge where communities specialize in different types of production and exchange manufactured goods through organized trading systems. New England communities develop textile production using local wool and cotton, creating clothing and household goods for trade with other regions. Furniture making utilizes local hardwood resources to produce handcrafted pieces for regional markets. Pacific Northwest areas focus on lumber products, utilizing forest resources to produce construction materials, furniture components, and wooden tools for trade with agricultural and urban communities. Metal working operations process recycled materials into tools, hardware, and mechanical components needed for manufacturing and construction. Southern regions emphasize agricultural processing, converting raw crops into food products, textiles, and industrial materials. Chemical production using agricultural feedstocks provides essential materials for manufacturing, cleaning, and agricultural applications. These regional specializations create interdependent networks that provide manufactured goods while maintaining local economic control and avoiding dependence on distant supply chains that proved vulnerable to currency collapse. The healthcare system stabilizes through regional cooperation networks that coordinate medical services, pharmaceutical production, and health education across multiple communities. Medical professionals develop training programs for community health workers who provide basic care and health education. Pharmaceutical cooperatives attempt to maintain production of essential medications through resource sharing and technical cooperation. Medical schools adapt their curricula to emphasize community-based practice and preventive care approaches that function effectively without complex medical technology and pharmaceutical dependence. Traditional healing methods receive renewed attention as communities seek healthcare approaches that rely on local resources and knowledge. Regional health networks coordinate specialized services where communities share the costs and benefits of expensive medical equipment and procedures. Surgical centers serve multiple communities through scheduling systems that coordinate patient transportation and postoperative care. Medical specialists travel between communities providing services in exchange for regional support and resource sharing. Emergency medical services organize through volunteer networks and resource sharing agreements that maintain ambulance services and emergency response capabilities. Communities coordinate training for emergency responders and share equipment and supplies needed for trauma care and disaster response. The education transformation accelerates as communities create learning systems that prepare young people for post-dollar economic realities while maintaining academic knowledge and critical thinking skills. Community schools emphasize practical skills, cooperation, and local production alongside traditional academic subjects. Trade apprenticeships become popular as young people learn manufacturing, agricultural, and technical skills directly applicable to community economic needs. Educational cooperatives develop comprehensive curricula that integrate academic learning with practical skills development. Children learn mathematics through construction projects, resource management, and production planning. Science education focuses on sustainable agriculture, renewable energy systems, and environmental stewardship. Social studies explores community organization, cooperation, and conflict resolution. Higher education transforms toward practical application as universities that survive currency collapse focus on research and training that directly benefits their local communities. Engineering programs develop appropriate technology for community manufacturing and infrastructure. Agricultural programs focus on sustainable food production and environmental management. Medical programs emphasize community health and preventive care. Adult education programs help former office workers, financial professionals, and service industry employees develop practical skills needed for post-dollar economic participation. Career retraining focuses on manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, and education sectors that provide essential services in cooperative economic systems. The arts and culture development continues flourishing as creative expression provides psychological and social benefits that become especially important during economic transition. Community cultural centers organize performances, exhibitions, and creative workshops that bring people together and maintain human connections beyond economic transactions. Artists contribute to community well-being through public art, cultural events, and creative problem-solving for community challenges. Music and performance arts adapt to community-based support systems where artists receive housing, food, and materials in exchange for regular performances and cultural programming. Community theaters operate through volunteer participation and resource sharing, creating productions that reflect post-dollar experiences and community values. Visual arts flourish as communities recognize the importance of beauty and creative expression for psychological well-being. Public art projects involve community participation in creating murals, sculptures, and environmental art that celebrate cooperation and resilience. Artists work with functional crafts, creating pottery, textiles, and decorative objects that serve practical purposes while providing aesthetic value. Literary communities develop strong traditions of storytelling, poetry, and writing that document post-dollar experiences and help communities process their transformation. Local publications share stories, practical information, and cultural content that strengthens community identity and connection. Cultural festivals and celebrations become central to community life as people organize events that bring together multiple communities for artistic exchange, trade opportunities, and social connection. These gatherings strengthen regional relationships while celebrating creativity and cultural diversity. The family and social relationship impacts prove complex as post-dollar economics affects how people form relationships, raise children, and plan for the future. Some families become closer as they depend more heavily on each other for economic security. Others experience stress as individual financial independence becomes impossible and family cooperation becomes essential for survival. Marriage and relationship patterns shift as people form partnerships based more on practical cooperation and emotional compatibility rather than financial considerations. Young adults delay independent living as extended family cooperation becomes economically necessary. Child rearing becomes more community-oriented as parents depend on neighbors and relatives for support that previously could be purchased with money. Extended family networks become crucial for economic security as households pool resources, share labor, and coordinate care for children and elderly family members. Multi-generational living arrangements become common as families recognize the economic and social benefits of cooperation across age groups. Dating and courtship adapt to post-dollar conditions as people meet through community activities, work cooperation, and social events rather than commercial entertainment venues. Relationships develop around shared values, practical compatibility, and mutual support rather than financial status or consumer lifestyle compatibility. The elderly experience varied impacts depending on community support systems and their own practical skills. Seniors with valuable knowledge and abilities find important roles in post-dollar communities as teachers, advisors, and skilled craftspeople. Those with limited physical capabilities but no financial resources require community care and support systems that replace lost retirement income and medical insurance. Successful communities develop comprehensive elder care systems through intergenerational cooperation where older adults provide wisdom, childcare, and cultural continuity while receiving physical care and support from younger community members. These arrangements create meaningful roles for elderly people while distributing care responsibilities across extended family and community networks. The psychological long-term adaptation reveals that humans can maintain mental health and life satisfaction in post-dollar environments when communities provide security, purpose, and social connection. People who find meaningful roles in community economic systems report good psychological adjustment despite material hardship. Those who cannot adapt to cooperative economic arrangements experience ongoing stress and dissatisfaction. Mental health support becomes community-based as professional therapy becomes available through barter arrangements and mutual aid. Support groups help people process the trauma of economic system collapse and develop coping strategies for post-dollar living. Community counselors provide guidance for interpersonal conflicts and adjustment challenges that arise from economic interdependence. Stress-related health problems decrease in well-organized communities as economic security through cooperation reduces individual financial anxiety. However, adjustment disorders increase among people who struggle to adapt from competitive, individualistic economic relationships to cooperative community-based systems. Social hierarchies reorganize around community contribution and practical skills rather than wealth accumulation and financial status. Leadership roles develop among people who can coordinate cooperation, resolve conflicts, and organize production effectively. Social status derives from reliability, generosity, and community service rather than individual economic achievement. As the first year approaches, America recognizes that post-dollar economics requires fundamental changes in social organization, individual expectations, and community cooperation. The most successful areas create systems that provide economic security, individual opportunity, and collective prosperity through cooperation rather than competition, shared ownership rather than individual accumulation, and community responsibility rather than market mechanisms. 1 year after the dollar collapse, America has fractured into a complex landscape of different economic experiments, with some communities achieving remarkable prosperity through cooperation while others struggle with ongoing poverty and conflict, revealing both human potential for economic innovation and the challenges of coordinating complex societies without standardized monetary systems. The success stories demonstrate that post-dollar economics can create abundance when communities develop effective organization, maintain social trust, and coordinate production and distribution through sophisticated systems that don't require currency. The most thriving areas achieve living standards that approach pre-collapse prosperity while providing greater economic security and community connection than existed under dollar-based capitalism. The Pacific Northwest Cooperative Network represents the most successful large-scale post-dollar economic organization, coordinating resource sharing and trade across multiple states through integrated systems for agriculture, manufacturing, energy, and services. The network includes over 2 million participants who contribute their skills and resources to collective economic activity while receiving security and prosperity that exceeds what most achieved under dollar-based individual economic competition. The network operates through sophisticated digital record-keeping that tracks contributions and consumption across thousands of different goods and services without creating currency that could become worthless. Regional coordination centers manage resource flows, production planning, and dispute resolution. Local communities maintain autonomy over internal organization while participating in broader economic integration that provides efficiency and security. Former Amazon executive Maria Rodriguez now coordinates logistics for the Pacific Network, applying her supply chain expertise to post-dollar resource distribution. "We're moving more goods and services than I ever managed in corporate logistics," she explains while reviewing coordination systems at the network's Seattle headquarters. "But we're doing it through cooperation instead of profit maximization, which means everyone benefits from efficiency gains instead of just shareholders." The network's distribution systems utilize former retail infrastructure, converting shopping malls and big-box stores into community resource centers where people access goods and services through contribution-based allocation systems. Former logistics workers apply their expertise to coordinate transportation, warehousing, and inventory management through cooperative arrangements rather than corporate employment. The network's success attracts international attention as foreign governments and organizations study American post-dollar innovations for potential applications in their own economic systems. European Union representatives visit Pacific Northwest communities to understand how complex economic coordination functions without currency-based pricing mechanisms. International delegations study the network's digital coordination systems, resource allocation algorithms, and conflict resolution procedures. The cooperative model influences economic policy discussions in countries facing their own monetary instability and seeking alternatives to traditional capitalist and socialist systems. The agricultural transformation proves particularly successful as farming communities organize comprehensive food production and distribution systems that eliminate hunger while maintaining environmental sustainability. Regional agricultural cooperatives coordinate crop planning, resource sharing, and food distribution across diverse climatic zones and agricultural specialties. The Great Plains Agricultural Federation manages food production across 8 states through integrated planning that ensures food security for urban and rural populations while maintaining soil health and environmental balance. Farmers specialize in different crops while sharing equipment, knowledge, and labor through sophisticated cooperation agreements. Agricultural productivity increases in many regions as cooperative farming eliminates competitive waste and coordinates production based on actual food needs rather than profit maximization. Crop rotation systems improve soil health while diverse plantings reduce pest problems and increase nutritional variety in food supplies. The Federation organizes seed-sharing networks that maintain genetic diversity while developing crop varieties adapted to local conditions and climate change impacts. Former agricultural scientists work through the Federation to develop sustainable farming techniques that function without expensive chemical inputs and fossil fuel dependence. Food distribution networks eliminate hunger in participating communities while reducing food waste through careful coordination of production, processing, and consumption. Community kitchens and food preparation centers process agricultural products into diverse food options while providing social gathering spaces that strengthen community bonds. The manufacturing renaissance continues expanding as communities realize that local production provides economic security and employment opportunities that don't depend on international trade relationships that require currency-based transactions. Regional manufacturing networks produce consumer goods, industrial equipment, and construction materials through integrated supply chains and coordinated production planning. Cooperative manufacturing achieves remarkable success in producing durable goods, tools, and equipment needed for community economic activities. Former automotive workers establish manufacturing cooperatives that produce bicycles, electric vehicles, and transportation equipment adapted to post-dollar conditions. Steel workers organize production facilities that process recycled materials into construction materials and manufacturing components. Innovation accelerates in cooperative manufacturing as workers apply their expertise to developing products specifically designed for community needs rather than corporate profit maximization. Products emphasize durability, repairability, and multi-purpose functionality rather than planned obsolescence and consumer fashion trends. The healthcare system achieves remarkable success through community-based organization that provides comprehensive medical care while emphasizing prevention and community health promotion. Medical cooperatives coordinate services across regions while maintaining local clinics and health centers. Pharmaceutical production combines traditional knowledge with modern scientific methods to manufacture essential medications through community-based facilities. Regional medical centers provide specialized services through resource-sharing agreements that enable communities to maintain access to advanced medical care without individual payment systems. Surgical centers, diagnostic facilities, and emergency services operate through cooperative funding and staffing arrangements. Pharmaceutical cooperatives successfully produce essential medications using simplified manufacturing processes and local resources. Herbal medicine programs develop alongside conventional pharmaceutical production, creating comprehensive healthcare systems that combine traditional and modern medical approaches. Preventive health programs achieve remarkable success as communities organize nutrition, exercise, and wellness activities that improve overall health while reducing demand for expensive medical interventions. Community health workers provide education and basic care that prevents serious health problems before they require complex treatment. The education system evolves into comprehensive community learning networks that prepare people for post-dollar economic participation while maintaining academic knowledge and critical thinking skills. Community colleges retrain adults for new economic roles. Youth apprenticeship programs combine practical skills training with academic education. Universities focus on research and development that benefits their local communities directly. Educational innovation flourishes as learning systems adapt to community needs and cooperative values. Project-based learning integrates academic subjects with practical problem-solving for community challenges. Students learn mathematics through construction projects, resource management, and production planning. Science education focuses on sustainable technology, environmental stewardship, and community health. Adult education programs successfully retrain former financial workers, service industry employees, and other professionals for productive roles in cooperative economic systems. Career transitions focus on manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, and education sectors that provide essential community services. Universities that survive the transition focus their research and teaching on practical applications that benefit their local communities directly. Engineering programs develop appropriate technology for community manufacturing and renewable energy systems. Agricultural programs research sustainable food production and environmental management. Social science programs study cooperative organization and conflict resolution. The technology development continues through community-based innovation that maintains communication, information processing, and coordination systems essential for complex economic organization. Local technology cooperatives maintain internet infrastructure, develop software for community management, and manufacture electronic equipment through shared facilities and expertise. Technology innovation adapts to post-dollar conditions by emphasizing durability, repairability, and community control rather than rapid obsolescence and corporate dependence. Computer hardware cooperatives refurbish and upgrade equipment through shared technical expertise. Software development focuses on open-source applications that serve community coordination and educational needs. Communication networks prove essential for coordinating economic activity across geographic distances. Community internet cooperatives maintain broadband access while developing local content and services that strengthen community connections. Radio networks provide backup communication systems that function independently of commercial telecommunications infrastructure. Innovation in appropriate technology accelerates as communities develop tools and equipment specifically designed for cooperative economic activities. Solar panel production, wind turbine manufacturing, and energy storage systems provide technical independence from commercial energy companies. However, the failure stories reveal the challenges and limitations of post-dollar economics when communities cannot achieve effective organization or when social divisions prevent the cooperation necessary for complex economic coordination. Areas with ongoing poverty, conflict, and instability demonstrate that post-dollar success requires specific social and organizational conditions that not all communities can achieve. The Southern California metropolitan region struggles with post-dollar adaptation because population density, limited agricultural land, and social inequality make community-wide economic cooperation extremely difficult. Different areas develop separate economic systems that compete for resources rather than cooperating for mutual benefit. The lack of local production capability and dependence on complex supply chains creates ongoing shortages and economic instability. Social tensions intensify in struggling areas as different communities compete for scarce resources while lacking the social trust and organizational capability needed for effective cooperation. Some neighborhoods achieve successful organization while others experience ongoing poverty and conflict, creating stark contrasts within metropolitan areas. Gang activity and criminal organizations adapt to post-dollar conditions by controlling resource distribution and trade opportunities in areas that lack effective community organization. These criminal networks provide security and resource access in exchange for loyalty and tribute, creating parallel economic systems based on coercion rather than cooperation. The contrast between successful and struggling communities demonstrates that post-dollar economics requires specific social conditions, trust, cooperation, leadership, and shared values that cannot be quickly developed in areas with pre-existing social divisions and institutional breakdown. The question facing American communities becomes not whether they can survive without dollars, but whether they can build economic systems that provide prosperity, security, and individual fulfillment while avoiding the vulnerability that comes from dependence on currency systems that can collapse overnight and destroy economic security instantly. As the second year begins, successful communities face new challenges around maintaining their prosperity and organization over longer time periods, continuing innovation and development without currency-based investment mechanisms, and providing individual opportunity and personal fulfillment that match or exceed what was available under dollar-based economic systems. The evidence suggests that post-dollar economics can create prosperity, security, and community connection that exceed what most Americans experienced under dollar-based capitalism, but only when communities achieve the social trust, organizational capability, and production diversity necessary for complex cooperation without currency-based coordination mechanisms. The Great Transformation reveals that money is not necessary for prosperity, but cooperation, trust, and effective organization are essential for any economic system that provides security and abundance for its participants. America discovers that the end of the dollar is not the end of prosperity. It's the beginning of understanding what prosperity actually means when measured by community well-being rather than individual wealth accumulation.